My family tried to steal everything from me. Discover how I won my freedom. I'll never forget the day I finally opened the door to my own home and saw my family walking in after 14 years of estrangement. It felt surreal, yet terrifying. The smell of fresh paint was still there, mixed with the cheap perfume my mother always wore to look elegant. My hands trembled as I gripped the doorknob, and my stomach churned with anxiety and fear of the confrontation I knew was coming. I was 32, a businesswoman and programmer, and yet I felt 17 again, vulnerable, exposed. Every step I took toward the living room brought back memories of the past. Sleepless nights, bills I couldn't pay, the shame of having my name used in fraud by my own family, being thrown out of the house with a small suitcase, and a crushing sense of rejection. All of this came flooding back in seconds. I knew this wasn't just a housewarming party. It was a defining moment for my life, the line between, repeating patterns of abuse, or finally breaking free. My heart was pounding. My mind was trying to process how to react, and I knew any hesitation would be used against me. Every detail of that house represented years of effort, endless nights of work, difficult choices, and sacrifices no one ever appreciated. I needed to prove first to myself that I was finally in control of my own destiny. When my mother entered the room, the fake smile plastered on her face made me feel like I was stepping back into the darkest moments of my adolescence. She always had this ability to manipulate, to turn any situation to her advantage, and I felt my stomach tighten as I remembered all the times her words had humiliated me or made me doubt myself. Beside her was my sister Veronica, with that air of superiority and the certainty that she would always be the favorite, protected, pampered, as if none of my struggles mattered. The contrast between us was stark. Me, rebuilding my life from scratch, and her, accustomed to receiving everything effortlessly. The moment our eyes met, I realized I could no longer be the submissive Lena I once was. Every memory of expulsion, every debt I'd had to pay because of others, every night I cried in secret and wondered if I would ever be able to have anything of my own, came flooding back. I took a deep breath, trying to control the rising anger, the pounding fear in my chest, and the shame I'd always carried. But I felt something had shifted. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was determination. This encounter would be different, and I needed to hold on, even as I felt every fragment of old pain resurface like a relentless wave. As my mother talked about the house and how good it would be for the children to be there, I felt my heart tighten as if someone had stepped on it. She spoke in that sweet tone, but I knew it was emotional blackmail. I could clearly see she was trying to manipulate me, as she always did, and for the first time in my life, I didn't want to give in. I felt a mixture of anger and disbelief, thinking of everything I'd endured to get here. I remembered the times I'd worked late, sleepless nights to pay my own bills, while my sister lived sheltered and effortless. I remembered every humiliation, every time my mother made me feel like I deserved nothing. But then I looked at my nephews, James fiddling with the computer I'd prepared, Freya with her eyes shining in her science books, Caleb running through the garden. I'd designed with such care. It was in that instant that I felt the transformation within me. Anger gave way to clarity and strength, and I knew I couldn't allow history to repeat itself. I had the chance to set clear boundaries, to protect my achievement, and at the same time, to help those I truly wanted to support without giving in to manipulation. Every emotion I felt in that moment, fear, pain, anger, hope, became fuel. I took a deep breath, felt my heart pound, and finally spoke out loud. This house is mine. It's not for sale. It's not available to anyone. It's my achievement, the fruit of my work and sacrifice. We will not give in. My voice was firm, and I felt each word like a cry of liberation. I saw the shock and fury in my mother's eyes, but I didn't back down. For the first time, I felt like I owned my life, without needing anyone's approval or permission. All the weight I'd carried for years seemed to slowly lift, and I finally realized I had the right to say no, to protect my achievement, to set boundaries, and to teach that respect is not negotiable. It was a moment of brutal clarity. Everything I'd suffered, all the injustices and manipulations, had prepared me for that moment. Looking at my nephews, I felt a different warmth, a mixture of pride and responsibility. I wanted to help them without letting the family's toxicity affect them. I planned educational funds for them, encouraged James with coding, Freya with science, and Caleb with his passion for dinosaurs. The feeling of finally being able to help without hurting myself was liberating. And when my father walked in, hesitantly, trying to reconcile after years of estrangement, I felt a mixture of relief and hope. I no longer had to carry the burden of pleasing my mother, nor repeat old patterns. For the first time, I felt safe, respected, and in control of my own story. I was Lena, and nothing and no one could stop me from building my life anymore. After I spoke firmly about the house, I felt a heavy tension settle in the air. My mother stood still for a few seconds, as if unable to process that the once submissive Lena had disappeared. Veronica took a deep breath, feigning understanding, but I knew that look well. The expectation of manipulation, of finding an opening, of weakening me. But I was no longer that 18-year-old girl, thrown out of her home, penniless, and without anyone. Every emotional scar I'd carried over the years now became a shield. I took a deep breath and looked around, taking in every detail of my home, remembering the nights I'd worked until my eyes burned with exhaustion, the loneliness that accompanied me at every turn, the shame of asking for help, the times I'd had to reinvent myself to avoid breaking. It was a stark contrast. The house seemed silent and safe, but my memories screamed in my chest. I felt fear, but a greater inner strength took over. The anger and frustration I'd felt for years transformed into clarity, into a determination that I wouldn't give in. This wasn't just the defense of a physical home, but of my dignity, my autonomy, my right to exist without being controlled or manipulated. For the first time, I wasn't alone. I felt that my choices and achievements protected me from everything and everyone who had ever tried to bring me down. When my mother began to insist, speaking with venomous sweetness, reminding me of family and solidarity, I felt a wave of emotional exhaustion. The manipulation was old, so familiar that my body reacted before my mind. But this time, I took a deep breath and thought, I can no longer allow my life to be defined by fear or imposed guilt. I remembered the long nights I cried in secret, unsure if I could survive financially, and the times I was emotionally betrayed by those who were supposed to protect me. I looked at my sister, at the way she trusted me to give in, and felt my heart fill with anger and determination. Every word she said felt like an attempt to erase all the years of struggle I'd endured. I had the right to say no, and I said it, firmly, looking each of them in the eye. My body was tired, my hands sweated, my chest ached, but my mind was clear. I wasn't the vulnerable girl I once was. I was a woman who had faced pain, loneliness, and betrayal, and still emerged stronger. I felt strength course through my veins, and for a moment, intense as it was, I felt the real freedom of being able to choose without guilt. Meanwhile, I looked at my nephews and felt a different feeling, a mixture of love and responsibility that made me tremble. I knew they could suffer the same patterns, the same manipulations and emotional abuse that I had. But this time, I was there to protect them. James was engrossed in his computer, and I felt proud to see that he was absorbing what I had left for him. Freya bent over books curiously, and Caleb ran through the garden I had designed, thinking about how he could explore nature without limits. It brought me a kind of happiness I had never experienced before. It wasn't just about me, but about creating a safe and inspiring space for them. For the first time, I could be helpful without being manipulated. I could support them without losing myself. This sense of control, of being able to act without fear of emotional retaliation, gave me strength and hope, and I finally felt that every tear, every sacrifice, and every night of fear had been worth it. When my father hesitantly entered and tried to approach, I felt another mix of emotions. For years he had withdrawn, manipulated, guilty, and lost. But there he was, trying to repair something that had been destroyed. I wanted to hug him and at the same time feel angry for all the lost years, for all the times I'd felt invisible. But I realized that this moment was about rebuilding, not reliving old hurts. I was able to look at him without hatred, and I felt that part of my freedom lay there, in the ability to set boundaries, choose who to stay in touch with, and still offer love and support. It was the first time I felt truly free to make decisions, without feeling like I was betraying my own principles or putting myself at emotional risk. The feeling of being able to handle all of this, of protecting my life while still offering sincere support, was both overwhelming and liberating. That day, I realized that winning didn't just mean having money or a nice house. Winning meant looking at the abuse and manipulation I'd suffered, and realizing that I could make my own decisions without fear or guilt. It meant feeling that every tear, every night I cried alone, every financial and emotional hardship had prepared me for that moment. I was aware that there would still be challenges, that my mother and sister might continue to try to manipulate me, but the power no longer lay in them. It lay in me, in my clarity, in my determination. I felt a strength I hadn't known I possessed, mixed with the weight of everything I'd been through, and for the first time, genuine relief. I could finally breathe without fear. After the firm conversation with my mother and sister, I felt my body finally relax, but my mind remained racing. It was as if a mixture of relief and tension coursed through my veins. Relief at having said no and set boundaries, tension because I knew this wouldn't be the last attempt at manipulation. I looked at my nephews again, observing each expression, each curious gesture, and felt a deep sense of responsibility. James was fiddling with the computer, programming small codes, and for a moment, I almost cried with pride. He had passion and curiosity, something my mother had never managed to encourage. Freya, with her science book scattered across the floor, and Caleb running through the garden, filled my chest with hope. For the first time, I could feel that my victory wasn't just mine, but also someone I could support without giving up my freedom. Every memory from the past, the humiliations, the expulsion, and the nights of hunger, surfaced, but now without paralyzing me. I felt the strength of each challenge I faced transforming into a kind of invisible armor. I was no longer vulnerable, unable to be manipulated by emotional blackmail. For the first time, I felt that controlling my own life was possible, that the pain I'd carried for years had a purpose, to make me resilient and aware of my worth. As I observed the family dynamics in the living room, I realized how different I was from the past. Before, any sentence from my mother or Veronica could bring me down emotionally. Today, I listened to them, recognized the manipulative pattern, and only confirmed my decision not to give in. It was liberating to feel that my painful experience had transformed into clarity and strength. My heart was still racing, and the tension hadn't completely disappeared, but the feeling of being able to choose, to set clear boundaries and act without guilt was incredible. I also realized that the anger I felt now wasn't destructive, but transformative. It helped me protect what I'd achieved, to keep my life in my own hands. For the first time, I could separate my love for my nephews from the need to please or give in to my mother or sister. I could offer support without losing myself, without allowing past abuses to define my life. At one point, I saw Daniel, my brother-in-law, trying to talk about the family's financial problems. He seemed nervous and insecure, but I saw an opportunity to help without sacrificing myself. For years, I'd been afraid to get involved in any family situation because it always meant being manipulated or undermined. But now I could act with clarity. I offered financial guidance and support to rebuild his career, but set clear boundaries. This feeling of helping consciously and without being exploited was liberating. I never imagined I could feel pride in protecting my own life while still offering support to those in need. For the first time, the feeling of victory wasn't just in material gains, but in the ability to act with awareness, intelligence, and empathy, without giving in to emotional blackmail. As the afternoon wore on, I noticed my mother trying to insist with small comments, testing my resolve. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of each year of pain, anger, and fear, but remained unshaken. Every memory of difficult nights, of abandonment, of shame, served as an emotional shield. I finally realized that the strength I felt came not only from my professional achievements, but from the entire history I had lived. Every tear, every lonely night, every humiliation had shaped me for this moment. I could finally look at them, hold my ground, and act without fear. It was the first time I had experienced complete freedom, even though I knew the scars were still there. The feeling of owning myself and my story was intense and overwhelming. Late that afternoon, as I looked around my house, I realized that day marked a definitive break with the past. I had faced the manipulation, pressure, and toxic patterns of my mother and sister without backing down. I felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief, as if every muscle in my body were relaxing after years of constant tension. For the first time, my victory lay not only in the material conquest of the house, but also in the emotional conquest. I could finally act without fear, without guilt, without sacrificing myself to please or avoid manipulative conflicts. And most importantly, I realized I could offer genuine support to my nephews, their father, and whoever I chose, while maintaining my integrity intact. The feeling of autonomy, respect, and clarity was overwhelming. I finally understood that my struggle had been worth it, and that despite all the pain, it was possible to transform suffering into strength and freedom. As the day wore on, I realized my mother wouldn't give up so easily. She began using small provocations, trying to put me back into the role of obedient and manipulable daughter. But each sentence only strengthened my resolve. I'd already endured sleepless nights, financial struggles, humiliations, and rejections, and this attempt was just another. Each time she spoke, I took a deep breath and mentally repeated that I wouldn't give in. For the first time, I felt that my worth didn't depend on her or anyone else's approval. I could say no, I could set clear boundaries, and at the same time, keep my heart open to those who truly deserved my support. I looked at my sister and felt a mixture of pity and contempt. Pity that she had never faced real challenges and contempt for having tried to manipulate my life for so long. However, I didn't want to harbor anger forever. I wanted to turn this situation into a learning experience, into strength. Feeling angry and still acting clearly gave me a sense of control I'd never experienced before. For the first time, I realized I could choose my battles and act intelligently without sacrificing my peace and dignity. As I watched my nephews, I felt a deep warmth in my chest. Their every gesture, every laugh, every curiosity was a reminder that I could make a difference without losing myself. James was coding little pieces of code, and I felt genuine pride. Freya was exploring science books, and Caleb was running around the garden, immersed in the natural world I'd designed for him. For the first time, I felt I could contribute to their lives in a healthy way, without giving in to manipulation or giving up my freedom. This feeling gave me strength I didn't even know I possessed. It was incredible to realize that, despite all the wounds of the past, I could still build something positive, solid, and lasting. The feeling of being able to help without being exploited, of teaching without repeating toxic patterns, was liberating. I realized that my victory wasn't just in the house, nor in the money or financial stability. It was in the ability to act with clarity, protect my life, and still offer sincere support to those who deserved it. For the first time, I felt my choices were entirely my own, without guilt, without fear, without manipulation. Daniel began to share with me the financial struggles they were facing. I saw in his face the fear and insecurity of someone on the verge of bankruptcy, but also the desire to get back on their feet. I could easily refuse, as I'd done so many times in the past, and simply protect myself. But something inside me told me I could help without losing myself. I offered clear advice and funds to help them reorganize their financial lives, but always setting firm boundaries. For the first time, I realized that helping didn't mean giving in or being exploited, and this feeling gave me strength and genuine joy. Every word I spoke was accompanied by the certainty that I finally understood my own worth, and that I could maintain my integrity without giving up on supporting someone. I felt that by helping, I was also closing a painful cycle of years of manipulation, of being used and exploited. The feeling of emotional empowerment was overwhelming, mixed with relief, hope, and pride. As the afternoon drew to a close, I realized my mother and sister were unresponsive, unable to reach me emotionally. For years, I'd carried guilt, fear, and shame. But in that moment, all of those feelings were under control. I realized my strength didn't just come from having my home or financial independence, but from having survived and learned from every pain, every rejection, and every humiliation. For the first time, I was able to say no without fear, to help without sacrificing myself, and to connect with my father and nephews in a healthy way. I felt a mix of exhaustion and liberation. Exhaustion from having faced so much. Liberation from finally being able to act with clarity, firmness, and awareness. I felt whole, in control of myself and my decisions. At the end of the day, as the family began to leave, I felt a calm I hadn't felt in years. The tension had subsided, but clarity remained. I realized that day marked a definitive break with old patterns of manipulation and abuse. I had faced pain, anger, frustration, and fear, and yet I emerged stronger, more aware, and more capable of protecting my life. For the first time, I felt that my victory lay not only in what I possessed, but in my ability to set my boundaries, act clearly, and support those who truly deserved it. I looked at my home, at every detail I had built with effort and sacrifice, and felt genuine pride. For the first time, I was truly my own person, without fear, guilt, or manipulation. When everything seemed to calm down, I felt a huge weight lift. I could finally breathe without fear of being manipulated or judged. For years, guilt and shame had plagued me, but in that moment, I felt like I had finally broken free from all of that. My mother and sister no longer held power over my life, my mind, and my choices. The feeling was liberating and frightening at the same time. Frightening because it meant I was now fully responsible for myself, but liberating because I could finally make decisions without fear. I looked at my nephews and nieces, and my heart filled with love and hope. I could support, teach, and inspire, without allowing the manipulation and abuse of the past to resurface. For the first time, I understood that my victory wasn't just in owning my home, financial stability, or professional success. It was in my ability to survive emotional wounds, to transform pain into strength, and to act with clarity, firmness, and empathy. I also felt my father's presence in a different way. He entered shyly, unsure of how to reconcile after years of estrangement, but I could sense his genuine intention. For the first time, I didn't feel angry at him, only understanding and hope. I could maintain our relationship in a healthy way, offering support and love, without sacrificing my emotional security. The feeling of being able to build bonds consciously and without manipulation was unprecedented. My body was exhausted. My mind was still processing everything that had happened, but the feeling of autonomy, power, and clarity was overwhelming. I could finally say that my decisions, my limits, and my space were respected, and this brought a peace I never imagined I could achieve. As I gathered up some party supplies and watched the sun set through my living room window, I felt a mixture of relief and gratitude. Every tear I'd shed over the years, every financial hardship, every moment of rejection and humiliation, it all led me to that moment. For the first time, I understood that the pain of the past had been transformed into learning and strength. I no longer needed to feel guilty or inadequate. I was capable, resilient, and deserving. And at the same time, I could support those who truly mattered without being exploited or manipulated. For the first time, I realized that winning didn't just mean success or money, but emotional freedom, clarity, and inner strength. In the silence that fell, I looked at the house, at every detail I had built with my hands, my effort, and my perseverance. Every wall, every object, every space was a reflection of who I had become, a strong, self-aware woman capable of protecting herself and those she loves. For the first time, I felt genuine pride in everything I had achieved and the way I had led my life. The feeling of autonomy and belonging was complete, even knowing that some wounds still existed and might never completely disappear. But that day, I felt that the pain no longer had power over me. I was in control of my story, my life, and my choices. In the end, I realized that my victory lay not only in what I possessed, but in what I had become, a woman capable of breaking toxic cycles, setting boundaries, protecting herself, and consciously supporting those she loves. I felt a mixture of relief, pride, and hope I had never experienced before. For the first time, I could say I was whole, complete, conscious, and free to live my life the way I chose, without fear, guilt, or manipulation. I could finally breathe, smile, and move forward, knowing that, despite the scars, my overcoming was real and definitive.